I never suspected my best friend was hiding a secret life, and when I accidentally found out, it shattered everything I thought I knew about trust and loyalty. I always considered myself the kind of person who could read people easily. I prided myself on intuition, on sensing when something wasn't right. That's why what happened with Ryan hit me like a freight train I never saw coming. Ryan and I had been friends since college, the kind of friendship where we knew each other's parents, jobs, and childhood stories by heart. He was loyal, or at least, that's what I thought. We'd shared apartments, vacations, and even dark nights of the soul when life got unbearable. And yet, one Tuesday afternoon, everything I believed about him collapsed into dust. It started innocently enough. I was helping him move some boxes from his apartment to mine because he was reorganizing his life after quitting his job. As we stacked cardboard, I noticed a small envelope sticking out from beneath a pile of old books. I picked it up, intending to hand it to him, but curiosity, that quiet monster, gnawed at me. The envelope was unmarked, and something about the weight of it felt deliberate. Against my better judgment, I slipped a finger under the flap and peeked inside. What I saw made my stomach turn. There were photographs, dozens of them, showing Ryan in places I didn't know he went, with people I had never met. But the most shocking part was the woman. The same woman appeared in every photo, laughing with Ryan, leaning against him, touching his shoulder in ways that spoke louder than any words could. My heart beat so fast it felt like it was trying to escape my chest. I had always trusted him, considered him almost a brother, and now I realized there was an entire life he had hidden from me. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was work-related, a modeling job, or some kind of photography project. But the photos didn't have the sterile precision of work. They were intimate, casual, almost voyeuristic. I flipped through them, each one twisting the knife a little deeper. I could see him in his favorite jeans, the ones he always joked made him look taller, with her in a small coffee shop I'd never been to, laughing over drinks. It wasn't work, it was personal, and I felt a punch of betrayal I couldn't name yet. Later that evening, I sat in my apartment, staring at the pile of photographs, my hands shaking. I kept asking myself how I had missed it. We spent almost every weekend together, texted constantly, and yet I had no idea. I began to replay our recent months in my head, looking for signs I had overlooked. The nights he said he was out, late for work, the texts he hid from me, the small excuses he made when I asked him to hang out. Every small inconsistency suddenly made sense, and every memory of our friendship twisted into a question I couldn't answer. I wanted to confront him immediately. I pictured the scene over and over, me holding the photos, demanding the truth, his face flushing red with shame or guilt. But there was fear, too. A fear that the reality might be even worse than I imagined. If he was hiding this from me, what else was he hiding? And could I ever look at him the same way again? That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing, cycling through scenarios where I asked him, where I pretended not to know, where I pretended it didn't hurt. The next morning, I tried to act normal. I met him for coffee, laughing at jokes, talking about trivial things. Every smile felt like a betrayal, every handshake like it was coated in lies. I carried the photos in my bag, flipping through them under the table, as if they were talismans and weapons all at once. The more I looked, the angrier and sadder I felt, and that was when I realized something terrifying. This wasn't a simple secret. This was a betrayal that cut deeper than any romantic cheating could. I spent the next week observing him, documenting small details, trying to understand who this other woman was, how long it had been going on, and why he would keep it from me. Each new clue felt like adding pieces to a puzzle that I didn't want to complete, but couldn't stop myself from assembling. I started noticing tiny things I had missed, a lingering text he deleted too quickly, a strange smile at a message he received, the way he avoided certain topics. By the end of the week, the weight of the truth had become unbearable. I realized the confrontation was inevitable. I had to know why he had chosen to hide this from me, to betray the trust that had taken years to build. I also had to decide if our friendship could survive this revelation, or if the bond we had shared was broken beyond repair. And yet, even knowing I had to face him, a part of me dreaded that conversation more than anything. I couldn't sleep that night. The photos burned in my mind like a live wire, and every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, convinced it was him texting me some lie. I kept rehearsing what I would say when I confronted Ryan, pacing my apartment, muttering fragments of sentences to myself. How do you tell someone you trusted with your entire life that they've been living a secret existence right under your nose? How do you reconcile the past with the revelation of betrayal? By Friday, I had resolved to confront him in person. I suggested we meet for dinner at our usual spot, a quiet bistro where we had celebrated birthdays, promotions, and even the small victories nobody else seemed to notice. He arrived early, smiling in that familiar way, completely unaware of the storm brewing behind my eyes. I sat across from him, letting him order his usual, sipping water, trying to keep my composure. Every laugh, every casual remark, made my chest tighten. I wanted to scream, to throw the photos on the table, to demand an explanation, but I waited. Finally, I slid the envelope across the table. He froze. The knife, like paws in the air, felt eternal. "What's this?" he asked, his voice neutral, a practiced tone that didn't betray panic. I leaned forward, my voice low, steady but trembling slightly. "I want you to explain why you've been living a double life." He looked down at the photos and then back at me. The color drained from his face. For a moment, I thought he might say something, confess, apologize, but he didn't. Instead, he opened his mouth and closed it again, as if searching for words that didn't exist. I could see the tension in his jaw, the tiny flinch of guilt in his eyes. I didn't mean for it to happen," he finally said. "It just did." I laughed, sharp and bitter, because "just did" sounded like the most pathetic excuse I had ever heard. "You think that's enough? After everything we've shared, after years of friendship, you just let this happen and hope I never find out?" My hands were shaking, the envelope of photos threatening to slip from my grip. "How could you do this to me?" He leaned back, looking almost ashamed, almost pleading. "I don't know, I wasn't thinking, I didn't mean to hurt you." He faltered. The words sounded hollow, rehearsed, empty. My heart ached. Not for the betrayal itself, but for the realization that the person I had trusted most in the world had fundamentally changed, or maybe had always been capable of this, and I had been blind. I pressed harder, unable to stop myself. "Who is she? How long? How many times?" Each question was a punch in the gut, but I couldn't stop. I needed answers, no matter how painful. Ryan hesitated, his eyes flicking away from mine. "A few months, it started innocently. She's just someone I met at work." Innocently. The word made me want to vomit. Innocently. You think intimacy and secrecy are innocent. I slammed my hand on the table. People turned to look, but I didn't care. I was past embarrassment. "You've been lying to me!" Smiling, joking, acting like everything's fine, while sneaking around behind my back. Ryan's shoulders slumped. The confident, easygoing friend I knew was gone, replaced by someone small and uncertain, like a child caught stealing. I was confused. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to lose you as a friend. The irony hit me like a brick. He had no concept of loyalty, of honesty, of the very foundation of what made our friendship real. You didn't want to lose me, but you were willing to destroy everything to chase what? A few fleeting moments. Some excitement. Some lie you couldn't control. My voice cracked, and for a moment I saw the same shock mirrored in his expression. After what felt like hours, the words finally stopped coming. We sat in silence, the restaurant noise washing over us, alien and distant. I realized then that this wasn't just about him cheating with someone. It was about trust, integrity, and the realization that the person you believed you knew might have been a stranger all along. My mind raced, imagining all the moments, the secrets, the laughter we shared that now felt like lies. Leaving the restaurant, I told him I needed space, time to process everything. He nodded mutely, guilt and shame painting every line of his face. That night, alone in my apartment, I went through the photos again, trying to make sense of the betrayal. My chest felt tight, my stomach twisted in knots, but I also felt clarity. Confrontation was only the beginning. Now I had to decide whether to salvage this friendship or let it go completely. Over the next few days I avoided him, ignoring calls and texts. I needed distance. Every notification on my phone made my pulse spike, half expecting another lie, another excuse. I began to reflect on everything we'd been through together, weighing memories against the reality I now knew. Each memory became a question: was it genuine, or was it part of the act? My trust had been shattered, and once that foundation crumbles, it's nearly impossible to rebuild. Then came the text I had feared most. Not from the mysterious woman, not from another friend. It was Ryan, sent hours after midnight. "I know I've hurt you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope we can talk soon." I stared at the message for minutes, my finger hovering over the screen. Could we ever talk again? Should we? And even if we did, could I ever look at him without remembering every lie, every secret, every smile that masked betrayal? I didn't answer that night. I didn't sleep well. I realized the journey ahead wouldn't just be about confronting him. It would be about confronting my own capacity to forgive, my understanding of loyalty, and ultimately, whether I could let go of someone I had once trusted completely. The next week felt like walking through a haze. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched, half expecting it to be Ryan's name lighting up the screen and half hoping it wouldn't. I couldn't focus at work. Each email, each phone call, even the casual banter of colleagues seemed unbearable because my mind kept circling back to him, to the woman, to all the secrets he'd buried right under my nose. Friends noticed my withdrawal. Some asked if I was okay, and I shrugged, giving vague answers, avoiding the truth. I didn't trust anyone with it, not yet, not until I knew where I stood. I decided to check further to see if there was more I had missed. Curiosity mixed with dread, a toxic combination, drove me to his apartment under the pretense of dropping off something I'd promised weeks ago. He greeted me warmly, like nothing had happened, like the entire world hadn't just shifted beneath my feet. I watched him carefully, noticing the nervous glance toward the bedroom, the subtle way his hand lingered near his phone. My stomach churned. The betrayal wasn't finished. After some small talk, I finally asked, "Are there more things you're hiding from me?" My voice was steadier than I felt, a low, even edge that startled him. Ryan froze, his smile faltered. I don't think so," he said, but the hesitation was enough. My gut tightened. I wasn't looking for half-truths. I wanted clarity. I remembered the envelope, the photos I had carefully stashed away. "These aren't everything, are they?" I asked, placing the envelope on the table. His eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw real panic. He swallowed hard. "There's maybe one or two things I didn't include," he admitted. I didn't think they mattered. That phrase, the understatement, was like a hammer hitting a fragile glass world I had built around my trust. The one or two things he hadn't included were emails, messages, and gifts, evidence that this had been going on far longer than the few months he had confessed. Each new piece of information made my blood run cold. He had carefully curated what I knew, sculpting a narrative that minimized the damage, that painted him as someone who had stumbled, not as someone who had knowingly deceived me. I felt a mix of rage, grief, and a strange sadness, mourning the friendship I thought I had. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went through every memory, every conversation, every shared secret, trying to detect lies I might have missed. Every laugh, every casual mention of plans, every recommendation or piece of advice. I wondered if it had been genuine or just a calculated part of the facade. The thought that Ryan had been leading a double life shattered more than just trust. It shook the foundation of how I perceived people, relationships, and even myself. How had I missed the signs? How had I let this happen? The following day I avoided Ryan entirely, declining calls and ignoring texts. The photos sat on my desk, a constant reminder of the betrayal. But then, amidst the fog of anger and heartbreak, a small, rational voice whispered that I couldn't just be angry forever. I had to decide, either confront him fully and risk the end of a friendship, or step back and walk away for good. Either choice would hurt, but only one would allow me to move forward with integrity. I began drafting a message, a confrontation, final and honest. I wrote it over and over, deleting and rewriting, trying to capture everything I felt without letting anger take over. "I can't continue like this," I typed. "You've hidden your life from me. You've betrayed my trust. I need to know who you are before I can decide if we can ever be friends again." My finger hovered over the send button for what felt like hours. Part of me wanted him to read it immediately. Part of me feared what his response, or lack thereof, might reveal. When I finally sent the message, I felt an odd mix of relief and dread. The confrontation was no longer theoretical. It was real. I had forced the situation into the open. I couldn't control his reaction, but I could control my own. Over the next few days, Ryan responded sporadically, sometimes with apologies, sometimes with defensive excuses, sometimes not at all. Each response cut me in different ways, keeping me on edge, forcing me to confront the truth repeatedly. By the end of the week, I realized something. No amount of explanations, apologies, or confessions could erase what had happened. The betrayal was permanent. My trust, once shattered, couldn't be fully restored. And though part of me mourned the friendship, another part, the part that had remained grounded despite all the lies, recognized that this was my chance to reclaim control, to stop letting someone else dictate my emotions and my sense of self. I began taking small steps, spending more time on my hobbies, reconnecting with other friends, and creating boundaries that protected my mental and emotional space. Ryan was still a presence in my life, but one I no longer allowed to dominate my thoughts. For the first time since discovering the photos, I felt a flicker of peace, a sign that, perhaps, I could survive this and rebuild something meaningful, even if it wasn't with him. The days after sending the final message were strangely liberating. For the first time since discovering Ryan's secret life, I felt like I had reclaimed a piece of myself that had been lost in the chaos of betrayal. I didn't know whether our friendship could survive, and honestly, I didn't care. What mattered was that I had set boundaries, spoken my truth, and refused to be complicit in someone else's lies. I realized that healing wasn't about reconciling with him. It was about reconciling with myself. I started spending more time on the things I loved, but had abandoned during the years of friendship and shared routines. I returned to the small hobbies that had once grounded me: sketching, reading late into the night, taking long walks in the park near my apartment. At first it felt hollow, almost like pretending to enjoy life again, but slowly, the colors returned. The subtle brushstrokes of life I hadn't noticed because I'd been too wrapped up in someone else's web of deceit. Each small moment became a proof of my ability to feel and exist independently. Friends began to notice the change. Casual check-ins turned into long conversations about life, laughter returned to my evenings, and I started rediscovering the joy of connection without betrayal lurking in the background. Even coworkers commented on my renewed energy, unaware of the personal battles I had fought in silence. It was in these small interactions that I felt the first real inklings of trust again, not the fragile, shaken kind I had with Ryan, but the kind that is built steadily, piece by piece, over time. One afternoon, a neighbor I had met briefly months earlier invited me to a small dinner with a group of mutual friends. I hesitated at first, unsure if I was ready for social settings where trust could be tested again. But the laughter, the easy conversation, the sense of community, it reminded me that human connection could still be genuine. I realized I was not defined by Ryan's betrayal. I could cultivate friendships and bonds that were honest, reciprocated, and free of hidden agendas. As weeks turned into months, I confronted my lingering resentment in therapy. I didn't expect forgiveness, and I didn't need it. What I needed was understanding that betrayal says more about the betrayer than the betrayed, understanding that grief is a process, and understanding that moving forward requires letting go, even when the wound is raw. Each session left me lighter, less obsessed with Ryan's actions, more focused on rebuilding my own life on my own terms. Then came the first genuine moment of peace. I was walking home from work one evening when I spotted a bookstore I hadn't noticed before. On a whim, I went inside, wandering between shelves until I found a quiet corner to sit and read. I felt content in a way I hadn't for months. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about what Ryan had done, about who he had been with, or about what could have been. I was present. Fully present, and it felt like a victory. Months later, Ryan reached out one last time, sending a message acknowledging his mistakes and apologizing once more. I read it and didn't respond immediately. I didn't need to. The words no longer had power over me. What mattered wasn't closure from him, it was closure within myself. I had survived the betrayal, faced the pain, and begun to thrive despite it. I also began to form new connections. Tentative at first, each one tested by honesty and respect. A friend from work invited me to a casual weekend trip, and we spent hours talking about books, music, and life. For the first time, I felt like I could trust someone again, cautiously but genuinely. The laughter we shared, the ease of conversation, was a balm to a heart that had been bruised but not broken. Looking back now, I realized that Ryan's betrayal, devastating as it was, forced me to confront my own strength. I learned that even the deepest wounds can be survived, that trust can be rebuilt, though sometimes in new places and with new people, and that life can regain color after deception and heartbreak. I am not the same person who discovered those photos months ago. I am stronger, wiser, and more aware of my own boundaries, my worth, and my ability to heal. The story doesn't end with friendship restored or perfect reconciliation. It ends with something more important: the discovery that I am enough on my own, that life goes on even after the most personal betrayals, and that hope, no matter how faint at first, can grow into a quiet but undeniable strength.